Kevin struggles with something most people can't even begin to understand. He isn't just one person. With 24 different personalities battling for control, his life is a constant war within his own mind.
It hurt, Casey.
Each personality fights for control, but one is far more dangerous than the rest. When one of his darkest personas emerges, innocent lives are at risk. In his Patricia personality, Kevin talks to 4 high school teenagers he had kidnapped, asking them whether they want a pizza. On the streets of Philadelphia, 2 teenage brothers pull a reckless stunt, hoping to make a viral internet video to get many views. They ambush a man, laughing as they record their attack.
You see his bag fall?
But a secret detective named David Dunn, who has been working independently to help the police reduce the crime rate in Philadelphia, shows up. However, the public sees him as being more vigilant than the police in detecting and handling crime rates.
Weren't you on a specified walk?
David follows and tracks them to their house, switches off the lights, and makes sure they regret it. David returns to his son's house, Joseph, who has been helping him catch street crooks using surveillance footage over the years. In their conversation, Joseph tells David something isn't right.
Pretty much settled on the overseer.
The incidences of kidnapping and murder of young teenage girls have been lately rising in the city. David comes up with a new tenuous theory number 2, which he uses to locate the exact places using a triangle on his surveillance footage. Alerts David. Using the theory, he discovers that the first set of kidnapped girls was mutilated at the zoo 3 weeks ago, the exact location of where the second set of girls went missing, and pinpoints the next target. David knows he has to act fast and insists on going out the following day to find the exact location, but Joseph warns him because police scanners have already picked up his movements. If caught up, it could all be over. However, he was determined to track the exact location of the kidnapping and stop the murders from happening within the city. In fact, his recent heroic acts got attention in the media, making people label David the overseer after being caught on camera. Before leaving for the kidnapping site the following morning, David spots a familiar man they had met 19 years before as they were teenagers. He's suspicious of the man, but decides to leave his security company and goes down to track the villain who had been kidnapping teenage girls and murdering them.
I watched a documentary about space.
In the town, he walks past many people, brushing his hands past strangers until he brushes Kevin's hands. This was no ordinary man, and David could feel it. He follows Kevin while communicating with his son until he comes to an old abandoned building, giving him a hint of where the innocent souls of kidnapped teenagers are waiting to be saved. But there was also something far more dangerous waiting in the building. Kevin has a unique psychiatric condition, which makes him have 24 different personalities, and the most dangerous of them all is about to wake up. Finally, David gets to the kidnapped girls and manages to free them. Meanwhile, Kevin changes his personality and acquires the personality of the Beast. Just before the girls get away, the Beast appears and hurls a table at David, but he leaps forward using his strength, just catching it in time. He holds the table, saves the girls, and then throws it back to the Beast, but it barely flinches. The Beast grabs the table mid-air and swings it around, hitting one of the 4 teenage girls.
We can work through this!
Her friends decide not to leave her behind and somehow manage to pull her to safety, leaving David to face the Beast. In a desperate move, David manages to maneuver to the window. He jumps as both crushes through the glass to the ground of the abandoned factory building. As they hit down, Kevin attempts to attack David, but suddenly, a bright flash of light hits Kevin and changes him from the Beast persona. David and Kevin are faced by a group of armed men who are instructed not to shoot by Dr. Ellie Staple, a psychiatrist who specializes in handling people with a group of mental disorders, which makes them believe they are superheroes. Dr. Ellie captures Kevin but makes sure David goes down with him, claims that David and Kevin are arrested and locked up in Ravenhill Psychiatric Hospital, where Dr. Ellie is mandated to treat them within 3 days, using all available means. To prevent any threat and escape, David is locked in a room that triggers multiple hose pipes to spray him with cold water if he's perceived as threatening. Kevin's containment is even more terrifying. He is put in a room with strong flashlights at the door to make him revert to a less harmful persona if he attempts to escape.
I came here for you both.
Dr. Ellie steps into Kevin's room and watches as his personalities shift. One moment, he's Dennis. The next, he's the Beast. He changes to a Beast personality and tries to attack Dr. Ellie, but is struck by the hypnotic light in his room, turning him into a calm personality with a soft voice. Dr. Ellie diagnoses David of osteogenesis imperfecta type 1, but doesn't tell him the truth. Daryl, one of the staff members employed at Ravenhill Psychiatric Hospital, watches Dr. Ellie closely, and there's something off about this doctor. She arrived too quickly, took over his wing too easily, and set new rules of conduct that didn't feel right, but questioning her could be dangerous. Admitted in the same hospital is Elijah Price, the man whom David remembers as being responsible for having caused the train crash that he survived a few years ago. But Elijah is weak and barely has strength. This time, he's heavily sedated, scarcely able to move, and locked under the heaviest security the hospital could provide.
I received a call from your foster family.
Casey Cook, one of the girls who had been kidnapped by Kevin, returns to school and gets informed by her principal that Kevin has been captured. This causes a lot of relief for her, but something doesn't still feel right. But back inside Raven Hill, the chaos is just beginning. Daryl brings food to Kevin, expecting to see one of his harmless personalities. He finds him in his Jade personality, with pleading eyes. Jade dropped the syringe on the floor near the hypnotic light and requested Daryl pick it up for him. Jade claims that their hands get shaky when he has low blood sugar, so he couldn't pick up the syringe. It seems innocent until Daryl hands it over. In an instant, Jade is gone, and the Beast is back. The Beast's personality takes over and attempts to attack him. He's hit by the hypnotic light as he attempts to inject Daryl using the same syringe, and Daryl energetically moves him back to his bed. This makes one thing clear to Daryl: Kevin isn't going to be locked up for long. He quickly changes Ian's personality, switches to Mary Reynolds' twin personality, and warns Daryl that the Horde would have killed him.
All right, step away from the controls now, little duck.
Using the hypnotic lights, Daryl tries to change Kevin's personality as he switches between Norma, Barry, and Priestley personalities. Mrs. Price has been visiting Elijah Price in the hospital for the past few weeks and tells Dr. Ellie that Elijah is almost giving up as he tries to understand who he truly is. His once brilliant mind is fading, crushed under the weight of sedation and isolation. Mrs. Price reveals something chilling to Dr. Ellie. When he was first brought to the hospital, he memorized a blueprint left out by an electrician and short-circuited the power to the entire hospital because he's good at thinking through things. Elijah has this notion that superheroes are based on people like him, and if he believes it, he might just prove it. As Dr. Ellie goes to see David, she requests him to have an MRI done, which stands for magnetic resonance imaging. She's convinced that his belief in being a superhero is nothing more than trauma, an illusion created by his past. After all, he was the sole survivor of the deadly train crash 19 years ago. Maybe there's something in his frontal lobe that explains his delusions.
You believe you have barely enough strength to stand up.
As she moves to Kevin's room, Kevin turns into the Beast personality and tries to harm her. He's hit again by the hypnotic light and assumes a personality trait of Mr. Pritchard. Pritchard tells the doctor that he's a professor of cinema, specifically Japanese, from the 1950s through the 1980s, and he has absolutely no idea what he's doing in the hospital. He immediately assumes a French personality, gets hit by light, and prepares to pounce on Dr. Ellie. As Dr. Ellie watches in fascination, Kevin slips further and further away. Then suddenly, another shift. The doctor stops him and tells him he can't get close to the light because it's being monitored by a camera. She asks him if his name is Hedwig, and he changes to Patricia, which is the High Priestess personality. The doctor talks to Patricia, and Patricia asks her about the Beast and whether he's guarded. Joseph decides to go and convince Dr. Ellie that if it weren't for his father, the 4 teenage girls would have been murder victims, but the doctor doesn't believe it.
If I don't get him to give up his delusion,
Dr. Ellie only has a few days to clear up David's delusion, or he will stay in psychiatric institutions for the rest of his life. As the doctor asks Joseph how David got to know the location of the girls in the abandoned factory, he says David thought that the killer might be in the factory area because his dad's friend Louis got mugged there once. The doctor doesn't believe Joseph. To her, David is just another patient suffering from delusions. If she fails to convince him otherwise, he will spend the rest of his life locked away. On the contrary, Joseph insists his father can't stay in the hospital because he was only trying to save the girls, but mistakenly got captured by the psychiatrist while trying to save the girls. Dr. Ellie reminds Joseph of his mother's death 5 years ago from acute lymphoblastic leukemia and tells him there is no way his mother could die if his father was a superhero. He finally gives up and decides to return home, disappointed in Dr. Ellie. Casey goes to the hospital and requests to talk to Kevin. Kevin's personality apologizes to Casey for trying to feed her to the Beast, and Casey requests to talk to Dennis and Patricia, who are other personalities in Kevin.
I can't. I've got to go. I've got to go.
Kevin changes to Dennis's personality, and Casey tells Dennis how a lot of people have died. She tells Dennis that the Horde has to give up the light, otherwise they would never let him out of the hospital, and urges him to listen to the doctor. Dennis says the doctor tells lies, and the Beast would soon start a revolution because it's the highest form of human evolution with nothing to stop it. Kevin switches back to his Kevin personality for the first time from the affection as Casey Casey touches him. She tells him that her uncle is in jail because he did something wrong to her, just like what her mother did to him was terrible. Again, Kevin breaks down and turns to a different persona. As Casey leaves the facility, Dr. Ellie requests that Casey help her restore Kevin's natural personality through true love, loving, and physical affection, because the lack of it caused Kevin to change personalities, and only the true version of it can heal him. However, Casey leaves without telling Dr. Ellie whether she should help him or not. Dr. Ellie visits Elijah and tells him she needs to perform a corrective procedure on him within 3 days to rebalance the part of the frontal lobe that is overstimulated.
We're going to conduct the procedure in 3 days.
The doctor also decides to conduct an evaluation by bringing all 3 subjects together to address their delusion. David becomes angry as he sees Elijah being wheeled into the same room. He tells Dr. Ellie how he literally killed everyone on the train a few years back. Dr. Ellie tries to convince them that their delusions are a result of the trauma they have experienced in life. For David, she had his MRI results showing a questionable cloudy area in his frontal lobe. After interviewing him, David finally agrees with Dr. Ellie's findings. His delusion was actually a result of some kids trying to drown him in a swimming pool. In addition to that, David's disorder is linked to the train accident he survived a few years ago and his traumatic childhood experience with his friends at the swimming pool. David's disorder gives him an intuition to distinguish between good and bad people just by touching them. Just by seeing and touching someone, he can interpret hundreds of clues that someone gives him within a split second.
That an individual is giving off in a split second.
For Kevin, it was after years of abuse from his mother after his father died. His mother used to yell at him even for minor issues like running in the house. Dr. Ellie Staple is unhappy with the way the previous doctors had handled Elijah in the hospital because his condition wasn't good to the extent that she couldn't manage to perform an MRI on him, but he has a marker of a delusional disorder. Meanwhile, Casey and Joseph visit comic shop books at different times, each to find out about Kevin and David. Joseph heads over to the villain's comic book section and picks a book that questions the real parents of a particular villain. Casey also purchases a comic book about a whispering monster. As she gets home to read the book, she starts hearing whispers in her mind of the words hot potatoes before she finally closes the book. Joseph becomes more curious about finding the real parents of the villain once he realizes the story in the comic book is directly related to his father. Pierce, a hospital employee, enters Elijah's room and finds out that Elijah has been leaving his room at night. Not long after, Elijah sneaks into the surveillance room and searches on the internet about vigilante Philadelphia's hero crime. He comes across the Green Guard fans and sees Francis Wallace's post, who had researched this matter extensively and believed that the overseer is real. He also reads Kevin's file and sneaks into Kevin's room before the next night guard takes the next shift.
Place the original dose of medicine with the same amount.
He speaks to Patricia and tells her everything extraordinary can be explained in a way, and yet it's true. Elijah believes some people don't die from bullets, and some of them can still bend steel. He further promises Patricia that he will get them out of the facility the following day at night if she allows him to meet the Beast. Elijah finally reveals himself to Patricia as Mr. Glass and exits Kevin's room. Elijah returns to his room, but is later woken up by Dr. Ellie, who says she saw him leaving his room on camera footage. The procedure is arranged and done the following morning on his frontal lobe to reveal his childhood trauma linked to his delusional superhero mindset. The procedure reveals Elijah during his childhood time when he went to an amusement park on a kid's ride where one wrong move made him break his arm and hit his head on a hard surface. As Dr. Ellie leaves, Daryl visits Elijah in his room to give him food. Still pretending to be in a worse condition, Elijah was hiding a shattered piece of glass in his shirt. As Daryl sits in front of Elijah takes the broken piece of glass and slits his throat, leaving him dead on the floor.
All the way. Yep, I can intro you to everybody.
Without losing time, he moves to Kevin's room and turns off the light, making him assume a calm personality so that he can see the Beast. Kevin turns into the Beast, and Elijah realizes that Dr. Ellie has lied to them because the Beast exists. To prove the Beast's existence to the real world, Elijah tells the Beast about the most significant event opening the tallest building in Philadelphia the following day, and suggests that the Beast should fight David publicly to prove its existence, since all the cameras will be focusing on the building. The Beast asks Elijah why he is in a wheelchair, and he tells the Beast that he was born with a condition that makes his bones break easily. He had suffered 94 times with his bones breaking since his childhood. The Beast tells him to rejoice because he had become pure by suffering and only knowing pains throughout his entire life, and the Beast had come to avenge them. Elijah gets to the microphone, wakes David from sleep at night, and then tells him there's no need to hide their superpowers. He only used about 1% of his abilities fighting criminals in the city, yet the police didn't appreciate it. Elijah had found a superhuman serial killer who would require David to use his full powers. He tells David that they are going to the tallest building in the city, where the Horde will be revealed. The building has 3 floors and houses the chemical company. Elijah plans to blow up the building using the company's chemicals. This tempts David to try to stop them, so that the fight between the Beast and David can happen at the building. Elijah also turns off the hose pipes in David's room, but closes the metallic door. David had to think of getting out through the metallic door or staying inside the room and leaving a lot of people to die from the explosion being planned by Elijah. Pierce, Daryl's colleague, gets into the security room,
Big eyes and bubbles of confusion.
sees Daryl's body on the camera, and decides to find out what happened. He checks Elijah and Kevin's room and finds the rooms open. He decides to check into the patient item storage room, where he meets his death. Pierce finds Elijah in the storage room already dressed up, but the Beast traps him. Elijah orders the Beast to fight for the Broken, and the Beast squeezes him, breaking his spinal cord and ribs, and eventually kills him. The Horde wheels Elijah out of the hospital and meets 2 women along the corridors of the facility after taking the lift to the basement. Looking suspiciously at Elijah, the women immediately call the security team, but it seems too late. On the other hand, David uses his strength to knock off the metallic door and manages to leave the room, although his footage is caught on camera. He gets into the patient item room, puts on his heroic garments, and leaves, ready to save the lives of people who were going to die from the explosion. Dr. Ellie tells Joseph how his father is making a lot of progress and insists by saying comic books are an obsession.
Comic books are not valid history.
Immediately, she gets a notification on her computer alerting her of unauthorized personnel in the tunnel. The Beast, trying to help Aja escape, faces the 3 security guards in the tunnel, fights, and kills all of them by throwing them on the walls using its enormous strength. Dr. Ellie rushes to the security room, only to see Carol dead through the camera. She also finds Elijah's hint and note, telling her that the Beast was heading to the tallest building opening event. She looks at the news on the screen. She realizes that thousands of people will attend the town's public opening of the Osaka Tower. She immediately calls external security agents and orders all patients to be locked, then alerts the Philadelphian Police Department of the Beast's plan to cause massive killings at the Osaka Tower. The Beast attacks 2 ladies outside the hospital and locks them in the vehicle. Suddenly, 2 policemen also arrive, and they manage to pounce on them before they can receive orders from their department, then end up killing them.
How many people are gonna die today?
Casey, Joseph, and Mrs. Price get outside the building, and the Beast decides to attack them. Just before that, David appears to fight the Beast, and Dr. Ellie calls the authorities. As the authorities arrive, Casey begs the police not to hurt Kevin because he has a DID disorder, which stands for Dissociative Identity Disorder. Instead, she requests them to use his calmer personality to calm him down without hurting him. Still, the police believe he's an animal and try to fight him. David also uses his strength to push the police into a nearby truck container and locks them up to save them from the Beast. The police fighting the Beast is brutally knocked down, sustaining multiple injuries as it uses its powerful strength to throw them and stack up on each other, and even tears flesh from some of them in an attempt to feed on fresh human blood. Dr. Ellie tells Casey the light won't work out, and Casey is the only one to get Kevin to come out and get them inside to safety.
Get inside the building.
Joseph constantly communicates with his father and notifies him that the 2 tactical teams are approaching. Meanwhile, David opens the vehicle and frees the 2 ladies locked up by the Beast, instructing them to get inside the building for safety. Unknowingly, the Beast gets on top of the vehicle behind David. Elijah points at a nearby water tank and tells the Beast that David almost drowned when he was a child, giving the Beast David's weakness so that it could defeat him. Just before the Beast attacks David, Joseph rushes in front of it and tells the Beast that Elijah was lying to him because in the comics, the parents of the villains always hold the key to understanding them. David tells Joseph to return, and Casey gets closer to the Beast. Elijah tries to stop Joseph from telling the Beast the truth, but he continues to say that Kevin's dad didn't just take any train to not come home. This reminder brings the memory back to the Beast, and it remembers Kevin trying to follow his dad onto the train. Still, his mother restricts him by pulling him back and leaving his dad to travel alone. Instead, Kevin's dad took the same train David was on, the one that everyone died except David.
One that everyone died except my dad.
At this point, Joseph tells the Beast that it was Mr. Glass who killed Kevin's father. Out of anger, the Beast jumps down the car and decides to attack them. Elijah defends himself to the Beast and tells it that Kevin wouldn't have been left alone with his mother without the train crash. Elijah justifies himself by arguing that if Kevin's mother wasn't allowed to abuse him, then the Beast wouldn't have had to be born. Mr. Glass was the one who created the Beast just the way way he created David, but it took him 19 years longer, and people almost believed that he had gone crazy. He boasts of being a mastermind at creating heroes, but the Beast tells him it came to protect Kevin. Everything suddenly turns around when the Beast tells Elijah it cannot trust him to keep Kevin safe. It turns against him, breaks his bones around the neck, and hits him in the abdomen, leaving him severely injured. The Beast also drowns David in the nearby water tank and strangles him underwater, just the way his fellow kids had done to him and caused him trauma.
In front of the world.
Using his remaining strength, David's tank walls break its edges, and as water splashes, it lets him out with the Beast. This weakens him, and the Beast swears to finish this matter before the world. The authorities arrive on time to stop the fight. As the Beast goes to attack the authorities, Casey holds its hand and calls him by Kevin's full name, Kevin Wendell Crumb, several times. Casey manages to bring Kevin back to normal and tells him he's in charge of the light because he has the powers to control the Beast inside of him. As multiple personalities leave Kevin, he falls into Casey's arms but is now weak and vulnerable. One of the members of the tactical team shoots Kevin in the chest, but he can't sustain the bullets in his normal state. The Beast in Kevin regrets having listened to Casey. Eventually, Kevin dies in her arms from a massive hemorrhage caused by the gunshot. Joseph tries to tell the tactical team members to save his father, David. Still, they bury his head in the water-filled pothole, weakening him.
They sent me here for you three.
Dr. Ellie approaches David and tells him to take his hand. As he reaches out to her, he notices a strange tattoo on her left wrist. He notices she belongs to a secret organization that sent her to the hospital once it realizes David, Elijah, and Kevin have been transferred to the facility. David tells her to tell him the truth. Dr. Ellie explains that the secret organization is committed to keeping superpowered people like David hidden from the public eye, and that it demands the superheroes die to prevent the rise of supervillains. She then asks David if she ever convinced him to believe he was expected. Still, before David responds, he dies at the hands of the tactical member who was draining his head in the water. Mrs. Price goes to Elijah, who had fallen down and vomited blood, to console him as he had been badly injured by the Beast. Dr. Ellie approaches her and requests her to step aside so that she can check on Elijah. However, she tells Elijah he was right from the beginning, but their organization couldn't allow it.
I like being 9.
The human race had worked perfectly for over 10,000 years, and their organization could not allow gods in the name of superheroes to exist among other normal human beings. Mrs. Price then returns, and Elijah tells him that he wasn't mistaken to be a superhuman before taking his last breath. Joseph also rushes to his father's dead body and accuses the tactical team of having killed his father instead of helping him, but no one listens to him. He checks this pulse and discovers his dad is no more, then lies at the side of his dead body wailing. Thereafter, Dr. Ellie returns to the security room to check on the footage taken by the cameras in the hospital. She erases all the evidence from the security cameras and gives a report to the hospital institution. In her report, she states the 3 patients were very disturbed, and everything that occurred was related to drugs in their systems or their heightened state of mania. For the sake of what happened, she orders everyone in the hospital to keep everything secret and not tell the public what happened. After the tragedy, Dr. Ellie meets his secret organization.
If you approve, I will move to the next city.
And informs them of her successful mission to keep the superheroes from being known to the public. She even asks for approval from the organization to move to the next city and silence more superhumans. She's not an executioner, and she doesn't need martyrs, but if all that fails, she uses force by having them killed in an attempt to maintain balance and keep order in society. She then goes to a comic book shop, where she hears the seller and one customer talking about a specific villain known as the Mastermind, who always has secret plans and sets everyone up. This disturbs her conscience, and she rushes to the hospital's security department to confirm whether all the videos and backups were erased, only to find out that someone was streaming the live security on a private site. Dr. Ellie then realizes why Elijah deliberately passed through the tunnel and avoided the entrance. His mission was to be seen by as many cameras as possible. At this moment, Dr. Ellie also remembers an electrician who asked her for permission to repair all cameras in the facility. That was when the electrician installed
He went through the basement tunnels to be seen.
Extra cameras and granted access to an external site without Dr. Ellie's knowledge. Elijah had been planning this all along, from his pretense of being severely sick to going to the Osaka Tower. His plan was never to go to the tower opening ceremony, but to expose Dr. Ellie's mission. The external site uploaded all the live videos to the internet, meaning the public would now be aware of superheroes and superhuman existence. Knowing that her mission had terribly failed, Dr. Ellie Staple screams in defeat outside the surveillance conference room. Mrs. Price, Joseph, and Casey uploaded the videos, and within 2 hours, they went viral with massive views, enlightening the public of the hidden heroes among them, even though they were dead. Elijah, Kevin, and David didn't get the recognition they deserved, but their legacy was immortalized through the very thing the secret organization tried to suppress: the truth. By exposing the world to the existence of extraordinary individuals, Elijah's plan succeeded in ways no one could have predicted. Ultimately, it wasn't about proving who was the strongest or who could win the fight. It was about making the world believe. But do you think the revelation of superhumans would improve society, or would it cause chaos?